Welcome to Freedom Friday. I'm Gabe Erickson, CEO at Warrior Transition Outdoors. And once again, we are at the studio at North Rim. Mike Dinapoli, man, quite the guy. We came in, he had the logo pulled up, and he's really just treating us because he cares about veterans. I called him, Tara. I called him, and it's like, hey, man, I'm going to be in town for the holidays. Do you mind if we come in your studio? And so super cool to be here, and awesome professional guy. And but I'm with Tara Ranstead. She's our civilian connection specialist. Full transparency disclosure, she's my fiance as well. But we were together before we started the nonprofit. And as my brother and I were starting this nonprofit, you were super intrigued, and you kind of put yourself out there for what you're doing. Tell the viewers just kind of that story and anything else about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of a moment where it was like super like profound, where I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, you know. But when Gabe and Gavin brought this to me to be like, hey, you should be our civilian connection specialist, you know, I sat and thought about it, and I've always kind of been somebody who wants to help people. And I was like, yeah, I love the heart behind it. I love the mission. Like, absolutely, I would love to. And I feel like it's been like just growing ever since, you know, my understanding of how to be in this position, and like what I've learned in this past year so far, what I'm going to learn, like, it's super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, this was personal to you too, and I think that's one of the reasons, like, my brother is military, and so is yours. And I remember you saying, like, this is so necessary. Like, my brother needs this kind of support.
Yeah. I mean, because I saw some things going on with him that maybe weren't spoken about, you know, not during his transition, but kind of just over his time out of the military. You know, he kind of kept a lot to himself, and so I kind of saw those effects. And so, yeah, it did hit home for me a little bit, for sure.
Tell the people, like, what is a, civilian connection specialist is. We formalize that name because we're all at WTO, we're all advocates, right? But you're like the lifelong advocate. Tell everyone, like, what does that entail?
Yeah, it entails a lot. So essentially, I'm kind of like a professional friend. I'm there to help people find resources, like, outside of WTO and also within WTO, because we have different pinch points that we focus on too, like employment and financial and education and stuff like that. So I help connect the veterans and their families to those resources. But also, I think a big part of the transition is like losing that sense of community. And so I'm really there as like a big support for them to kind of reconnect to the community. So I'll go on walks with them. I'll, get coffee. If there's like a more urgent thing going on, I'm there for emergencies. I'm there if they need to call me at 9 p.m. at night and vent to me. Like, my phone is, I'm 24/7 on call. Like, I'm kind of just there to be there for support, because when you lose that sense of community, you lose that support. And to me, I think that's kind of the biggest, most important part,
Yeah. I mean, we've had veterans tell me, like, Tara is the glue holding this whole thing together. That role, and you're doing it on a one-to-one basis, but you're also representing what WTO as an organization stands for, our mission. Like, I think they feel not just as like I'm one person, but like there's me, because of the relationships you build, veterans are more comfortable talking to me and others within our organization. And so, yeah, it's been pretty profound to witness. But what are some of the stories, like, success stories or things that you've learned about yourself? But I mean, there's just so many stories I feel like you could share that have led to freedom for people.
Yeah. I think like one story really comes to mind for me. there was a veteran who signed up for the program and he was not sure. He was like, I'm not into the outdoors anymore. I'm pretty isolated. I don't, someone recommended this to me and I'm not entirely sure. And so we kind of talked very high level on our first meeting about like what WTO is and all the things. And he's like, okay, well, I already can tell you like I'm not interested in the outdoors because, you know, I feel like the outdoors does not bring me joy because I can't get out of my head when I'm in nature. And I was like, that's understandable. Like, that's kind of why we do our family advocacy, is to like, you know, focus on those other things so that if and when you want to go outdoors, you don't have all of the things to think about and you can just enjoy nature. And he was like very like, nope, like I already can tell you I'm not going to be interested in outdoor stuff. And so yeah, he was not interested in the outdoors at all. He was very like set on that. And so we continued to talk for the next couple months, every once in a while, right? It wasn't like an everyday thing where some people I am talking to every day, but he's very busy with work. And so we would talk probably once a week or maybe 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. But when we did talk, it was always super heartfelt, super vulnerable on his end and my end. And I think that he started to get this sense of like, okay, this isn't a person that's trying to analyze me or, you know, make me talk about things if I don't want to. You know, like I think I created a really good safe space for him, and he did start to open up more and more. And our conversations encouraged him to kind of start thinking about different things. And eventually he was like, you know, I was not really ever interested in doing therapy, but maybe now I am. I think seeing this community within WTO and how you guys are supporting me, like I think that would be something I'm interested in. And so that was like kind of our first like step outside of like, let's get to know each other and get vulnerable and deep, you know, all the things. And so we started talking about that more and more. And I just remember one conversation, we had scheduled like a meeting to do a video chat because he was virtual completely, like I never met him in person. And so we got on this call and he was like, I am just like completely changed as a person, almost. Like he didn't say that out loud, but that's kind of the feeling I got. He had like hope. He had energy. He was smiling, and that wasn't like something that was normal in our other conversations. And he was like, you know what? I know I said I wasn't interested in the outdoors, but I feel like working with you guys and having the support from WTO and from you as the family advocate, I think it's gotten me to a place where I can do more stuff, and I can like be more confident in going outdoors. And yeah, it was powerful.
And I remember that specific veteran admitted to self-isolation as well. And so he also just didn't want to be talking to anyone. So the fact that he would talk to you was a big deal. And it's something that I see throughout the workday now and then when I am privy to it, is kind of, I'll hear a conversation going on and I don't listen because it's not my business to be engaged in that way, but I'll just hear like these gentle nudges or very like invasive leadership, but with just the most gentle, softest edge to it. And, you're not a trained counselor or anything like that. Like when you say professional friend, you're really just coming in as a friend, but you do a lot of like challenging too after you listen. I don't know how to describe it, but you're very good at that. What is that? Tell us about that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's something that I need and value in my own life, and I kind of just bring it to the table for other people. I know that it's important to have people around you who feel safe, and I always want to be that person to people. But I can also see like if someone's trying to tiptoe around like a hard subject or a challenging thing. I think because that safe space is created, then I can like gently be like, hey, we don't have to talk about it, you know, like it's not something I'm forcing you to do, but let's acknowledge it. It's there, you know. And when you're ready, if and when you're ready, because you might never be ready, but if you are, let's talk about it, because I'm going to accept it regardless.
Yeah, I mean, you do a great job, and WTO does, but you're like the face interacting with people, right? Of just no judgment. You know, no matter what you're going through, how can you get past, as we talked about in the last episode, the shame, the fear, the guilt, and things, if you feel like there's a sense of judgment waiting to like overcome you, right? And so by removing that sense of judgment, you get to lay these things down, and you do a great job of creating that space where people know I'm not going to get judged no matter what I say, and then they tell you like the real, honest stuff.
Yeah. Well, and WTO really focuses on, you know, you aren't just a veteran, right? You're a human first. And I fully believe that, you know, these aren't just like, they're not just veteran problems. Like we all go through problems. And they might look a little different or they might look exactly the same. And like, who am I to put you in a box, you know?
Yeah. Why do you think it's important that you're a civilian in this?
I think it's important to kind of bridge that gap. You know, I'm coming in with a perspective completely different than what the veterans and their families have gone through, you know, their experiences. But for them to feel a safe space in the civilian space, right? Because they ultimately, I'm pretty open about that initially when I meet people, like, hey, I really don't know much about the military. I don't know how to ask questions about, you know, what you've been through, what you're going through. But I think it gives them that opportunity to see the civilian side of things and relate to it in a unique way.
Yeah. I think in the veteran, especially the veteran nonprofit space, there's a lot of focuses on like resources. And so you hear a lot of nonprofits that are like, we have all these resources. But what would you say if you broke down the time you spend just relationally being with people versus actually offering resources? Like what is the percentage divide there? Because I feel like you do a lot of relating.
Yeah. I don't do a ton of resource stuff for veterans because that's not usually what people need. After gaining good relationship with them and chatting with them for a while, then they'll ask me about resources, or they'll like maybe a month ago, someone who's been in our program from the beginning, she was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing like service dog training, like getting a service dog. Would you look for resources for me? But up until that point, that's not what she needed from us, from WTO. She needed that relational, that very personal, just friendship, you know? So it's a pretty small percentage of resources, you know? So
Yeah. And as we shift paradigms and narratives and all these things, like that's what I try to help civilians, because I feel like as civilians, we have a job to do to build out the civilian side of the shore across from the bridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ironic that I had to drive over a bridge to get here. Like that's where the directions took me. And it was frustrating, man. Yeah. You were in the car. I was like, oh, man, took me over a bridge, because sometimes it feels like that's not where you're supposed to be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But as civilians, we have a job to do to create that space for veterans to feel like humans.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even call it civilian space. It's a human space beyond your service. Your primary identity is not veteran. That's a status, not an identity to claim, right?
Yeah.
And, to create a space for them where it's like, hey, you're human and you're doing all those things for people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what's so profound when people tell me about the work you're doing. And I love that you have that, because that espouses everything that like Gavin and I founded this on, so you're really setting an example as well.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Any other stories? Because I know people are probably dying, like, what exactly, does this look like? What do you do?
Yeah. Let me think.
How many veterans it's been a year now.
It's been a year. Currently, I think 35 veterans with 33 families. There's a couple families who are dual military spouses. So um, it's I don't talk with everybody all the time, right? There are some people who are more interactive or more engaged, may need more resources. There are some people who are like, hey, glad to be a part of the program. I'm doing great. And so I'm like, cool, that's awesome. Like, I'm here when and if you ever need or want me. So it's been awesome to build all of those families up. But I don't know. One of the stories from kind of early on in the program, probably within like the first 3 months, we had a veteran sign up, and she was really going through a lot at the time. She had 2 kiddos, and she's a single mother, just going through a lot of stuff. She had kind of a breaking point, and I felt like we were so new at the time. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where the boundaries were, if there were boundaries, like what do I do here, you know. But she had a breaking point where she ended up being put in the emergency room because she was kind of having like a mental breakdown. I don't want to make that sound like a bad thing, but
Just what happened.
it was hard. It was a very challenging thing for her in that moment. And so again, we had no protocol on that. I had no idea what to do, but I just kind of followed my intuition on, you know, if this was someone like a friend, if this was my best friend going through this, what would I do in this situation? And that's how I want to treat everybody in our program. But I ended up, you know, going to the emergency room several times throughout the week that she was there, to support her, even though, you know, she was kind of out of it. But I know that it was super meaningful to her to have somebody there, because nobody else was there for her. Like, every time I was there, no one else was there. And so those kind of moments are as important as the moments where someone's like, hey, let's go get some coffee. I just kind of need someone to talk to, right? Those really like deep and hard and challenging moments are just as important, and just as important as when someone isn't going through all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember when that happened, you know, being new, there was this outside pressure. It wasn't even my own inner dialogue, but there's this outside pressure of like, oh my gosh, like this is, you know, does this reflect poorly on our program? Did we miss something? Like, right? And when we just took a breath, it was like, this is the exact reason we're here.
Yeah.
Is for these hard moments.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and even if someone was completely trained in that sort of area, like there's no one way to know how to approach things or do things, because we're all human, and everything is different all the time. And so there's like an imposter syndrome almost, that is like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what to do right now, you know. And then you just like take a deep breath. What would I do in this situation if it wasn't my job, right? Like, what would I do if it was just in my life? Even though like in just normal life, it's hard to know what you would do in those moments, but it's, yeah, as long as you're kind of following your intuition on how to care for people, that's kind of where it's at.
I mean, you just struck it on the head. Like, we're not trying to be like every other nonprofit, and we're not trying to create this transactional countertop that veterans come to for service. We're trying to be there as humans, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And because the resources we have to offer are worth nothing if they don't come with this underpinning of a like relationship, right? So yeah, talk about too, like, you don't just serve the veterans. We don't just serve veterans. We serve the spouses. We have Gold Star spouses that we have in our community, with the kids. Like, talk about your interactions, not just with the veteran, but building relationships with the families as a whole.
Yeah. For example, one of the spouses, she recently got diagnosed with cancer. And so I've been really trying to be supportive with her through that. And those are very human things to go through, right? It doesn't necessarily have to do with the transition, but we totally believe that the transition is lifelong, can be really challenging and lifelong, right? And so to be there as support through all of the things and not just like some things for the families is like a huge thing. And I think that they really appreciate that. Yeah.
Spouses get left out. And in our minds, we kind of see the spouses as just as much. They might not be the veteran status, but they went through everything just from a different perspective. And they did the moves. They did, like when Aaron from our last episode was deployed, his wife had to miss that call. And she went through her own experience of what he shared that he went through, right?
Yeah.
And so they often get so left out. And I think I've even seen that where the spouses in our program feel like, I'm here because my veteran's here. And then as you like talk with them, they're like, wait, wait, they're here for me too. And then they get more and more like warmed up to that fact.
Yeah.
And then you build a relationship with them when that time is right and they feel included, That's my perspective. I don't know if you have anything to add to that or if you agree with that, but
yeah, I mean, there's been countless times where the spouse is like, I actually don't want to be involved. This is kind of a thing for my spouse here. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. I'll still check in on you every once in a while. And then they, after a few check-ins, they're like, oh, wait, this is kind of, for me too. And they feel that for sure. So.
And you do a great job with the kids too. I mean, the kids just love Tara. And so,
yeah,
that's awesome. What have you learned about, yourself, about veterans, especially thinking through this victorious veteran narrative, and we're trying as an organization to break all these stupid myths and stigmas that keep veterans down. What have you learned about yourself and veterans through all of this that's true and real?
Yeah. I think just that we all have challenges that we're life is challenging and there's going to be something different waiting for you to overcome. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is that once people feel like they can get out of the specific boxes that society has kind of put them in, then they feel more free to do what their purpose is, or find their purpose, if they're kind of lacking that. But the biggest thing that I have learned is seeing how they are put in boxes, and that kind of holds them back, or they stick to this narrative, like, for example, like PTSD, that can hold people back. If you're like, okay, I have PTSD, I will always have PTSD. It does affect my life all the time. If that's the narrative you're telling yourself all the time, yeah, it's going to be true. But if I've seen people be like, I do have this, or like I've experienced this, but it's actually kind of normal. After going through something super tough, it's normal to have that stress response. And I think, the lesson there is just to not put yourself in the box. And once people like understand that and know that, and I feel like our program kind of helps people with that, then they're kind of more free to be themselves.
Yeah.
And I think, and I go through that too. I have imposter syndrome and all these things about, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't have experience with this, and I have to break myself out of those boxes to just kind of be free, if that makes sense.
Yeah. As we wrap up, I'm actually going to open it up. We have a very small audience here, but I want, Mike or Aaron, if you guys do you have a question, anything coming to your hearts for Tara? Nothing for Mike. Aaron, nothing lingering, no curiosities about?
No, I just think it's a great program, and from what you're saying, Tara, it's much needed, and thank you for doing what you do.
Of course.
Yeah, it's we're very blessed to have her for sure. So thank you again to Mike for, opening up the studio here at North Rim for WTO to come in and just bring our energy to Portland, man, into the Vancouver area, which is
Yeah.
really cool. And if there's veterans in Portland and in this area, come on down. We're doing everything across the country. We're not just located in Montana where you see our mailing address. So that's one thing. You serve veterans all over.
Yeah.
How many different states?
Oh, the last time I counted was 14.
14 different states.
And that was a few families ago. So
Yeah. And we need more Taras. So if you're watching this and this is triggering you to think, man, I want to do that to help veterans, like reach out, because we need more people like Tara who ask that question, like, if this wasn't a job, what would I do for this person? That is powerful.
it is.
Yeah. So thank you, Tara, for joining us.
Yes, thank
and
you.
Everyone have a great Freedom Friday. We'll see you next week.